Today is the secret to all the money Sikastrength has ever made. So today we're doing the programming section of the lectures, and this is probably the thing that might be the most use to some of you in terms of like practical stuff. So obviously there's hours and hours of programming we could talk about, and the variations and specific blocks and things like that. And if you have any questions specifically, obviously feel free to interrupt and ask, because you'll probably forget them and it changes along a little bit earlier, because everyone else probably has the same question. There is such things as dumb questions, but that doesn't mean it's not a bad question. So we're going to start with the most effective kind of principles, or the base principle on how you should be programming for yourself, or the base thought on what it is that you need to put into training and your programming to progress. It's relatively simple. It's pretty straightforward. So this is an example, not too far away from what you'd probably do. This might be over the course of, say there's 5 weeks here, but there's going to be more than one snatch session or one clean and jerk session per week. So we're going to double this up a little bit, but the basic idea is similar. We started off with higher volume, a lighter weight. Let's say our max coming into this was 119, or let's say it was 120, or let's say it was more, but we still hit 120. We'd start off with 5x3 at 100. This is for the snatch, but we can use this for the clean and jerk as well. Yes?
What's the percentage?
So this is the actual absolute value here. The percentages don't matter hugely. They matter kind of where you are in training. So the big thing with percentages is we always start off really light. Yeah. So if we start off really light, we take appropriate progressions, then we'll end up on the numbers we need, So we could work through percentages. Myself and Darren, when we write programs, we'll sit down and write percentages for hours. But for you and as an individual, when you're using this, like how do I program effectively for myself, we're looking at numbers, which are percentages for sure, but I think numbers are easier to visualize for the sake of this kind of lecture, because you get a bit more of a faster quick math, as it were. So we're starting off with a max of 120, or 120 is what we can do with this training block. We go 5x3 at 120, 4x3 at 105, 5x2 at 110, 3x1 at 115, and we max out and we hit 120. That might have been a PB, or it might be equal to a PB, but we hit 120. Let's say that was over the course of something like 6 to 8 weeks, maybe 8 to 10 weeks. Generally training blocks are quite nice in a 12-week block, but let's say we did this after 6 weeks. When we repeat it again, all we're doing is keeping very similar volume and restarting that block. We might drop the volume initially, so we might not necessarily go back to our 5x3, we might go maybe back to 4x3s, or we might even go back to doubles with higher volume. We might go something like 6x2, 7x2, maybe something like that, maybe, and drop the threes in the second half of our block, where we're working these 12-week blocks. Generally they're best for the amateur recreational weightlifter. A 12-week section is kind of the sweet spot. It's with life, holidays, interruptions, sickness, events, work, family, all that stuff comes in 12 weeks. As many of you probably know, is getting consistent training over a 12-week course is not an easy thing to do in itself. So if we can get 12 weeks of training together, we're already off to a good start if we're not professional athletes. So this is the first half of the block. Maybe we reset the block, new weights. We started with 100, we go 102. Then we jump to 107, and we go 112, from 110, 115 to 117, and then we go for our new max and we hit 122. That's weightlifting programming, but you just have to do it for an average of 15 years. That's it, rinse and repeat. That's all that gets done. There's no magic. We can use pyramid schemes, we can use waves at appropriate times, and they can be useful, but ultimately this is the only thing that will reliably work for you. And you go through that and you increase those weights, and you hope you don't get injured. You do your best to mitigate injury. You hope you don't have interruptions. You hope you don't have a 2-week holiday. You don't go to Bali for a month and get wasted if you want to progress your weightlifting. You don't go and do a different sport for a month. You just keep doing the weightlifting. And along this time then, we're trying our best to effectively increase our technique, improve our technique. Technique is paramount, and there is no program without technique, and it's vice versa. All the way along here, we're working on new technique all the way up. I will show you hopefully Anton will send me some feedback and I'll show you that's very similar to the feedback that you're getting from us. The weights might change, but the technical issues are similar. It's just harder to keep a stronger back at 140 than at 80 kilos, but it's all relative at the same time. It's still very hard for you to correct your technique. So as we're progressing, the big key to this, even though we're doing the programming lecture, that's what the sessions are for, is the technical lectures, and we've done those technical lectures, is we're trying to have better technique. And hopefully we took a GPP block for that, or maybe you're injured, or we were downtime for like 2 months. One more time, Kyle, seriously now. I'm joking. So if we were injured for 2 months, that 120 might be nice. It might be really nice. We might have had great training blocks before that, and that was a 5 kilo PB, and our technique is on point. Or we're at a place where your technique is like, oh, and you don't want your coach to see it because it's really shit. So then hopefully, once we get to here, to 122, then we end up having better quality technique. So that metric of technique is improving with the sets and reps as the weights go up. So this volume doesn't really change across the initial years. Like I said, I've thousands of lifters who are in that kind of like 60 to 120 kilo snatch range, 100 to 150 kilo clean and jerk range, train 4 times a week, and if they get those consistent days in, they make progress. I've had some people snatching in the 140s and the 170s, and people snatching into 150s and in the clean and jerk in the 190s, 2 seconds, and they might go 5 times a week, you know. So the frequency and volume thing isn't the one that change, it's consistency, technical progress, and increasing those weights. Okay, so variation is programmed as needed. It follows the same template here, but is viciously removed or added as needed. So let's say, for example, Camilo, you bumping the barbell away from you a lot. So let's say we've gotten 4 weeks into our 12 weeks and we've been doing pauses and knee snatches, but it's not solving your issue, and we've discovered that you're knocking the barbell away from us, and we know that a snatch high pull plus snatch complex is the thing for you. We will switch out that pause snatch and kind of ruthlessly add in that high pull variation and progress with a similar idea to that, but not really to a max with that. Sometimes we can max with that. Sometimes we might get to, for example, if we use hang snatches, we don't need to have massive hang snatches above our 1RM from the floor. But if we get to 90% of our hang snatch, or 90% of our full snatch from the floor, that's our hang snatch, we might be like, okay, that's definitely enough. It's not going to benefit us anymore. We need to focus on that snatch and clean and jerk again. So variations, this is kind of get where the art of coaching comes in. You're like, what variation works best? What complex works best? What combination of those works best? How many days a week am I training? What is my issues? How big are my issues? How badly do I need to address them? Will a variation address them, or do I need to be working on technique and variation? Do I need to be working on a mobility issue? On top of that, do I need to be working on a combination of that? Is it a strength issue? Or is it a combination of mobility, strength and technique and a variation needed? So that's where the art of coaching comes in a little bit. Strength. Yep.
About variations.
Yep.
So I want to know about the percentages for variations.
Yes.
Because for many variations there are rules of thumb. Like, I don't know, your snatch balance should be 120% of your best snatch.
Yes.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And then of course there can be individual differences.
Yes.
Like how would you navigate between those two? Would you say just stick with what your individual difference is? Kind of work off of that?
Yeah.
Or maybe try to work towards something that is more optimal, because like maybe the difference you have in the percentage can be indicative of a technical problem. Like if you're very weak from the hang,
Yes.
maybe work towards getting that ratio up.
So the first thing to look at is my snatch and clean and jerk from the floor going okay? So that's the first place you look, and if that's going okay, then you can be like, right, I don't need to worry so much about those. I need to take note of them, but you know, you can't work in all variations all the time. So you can't be pushing your low hang snatch and your high hang snatch and your block snatch and your low block snatch all at the same time. So first of all, your litmus test is my snatch and clean and jerk going okay? Is it going the right direction? Is my technique improving? Then you're like, cool, I don't need to really adjust this. But then that's where the art of coaching comes in, where you're like, oh, low hang snatches would be great here, and you might be like, okay, I can only do 85% or 82.5% of my best snatch from the floor. You may go, probably need to get this around 90, or you might not even progress it that much, but it might improve the issues you're trying to do, so you keep it in your training. So it all comes back to, how is the snatch and clean and jerk going for you as an individual? Is it going okay? Is technique improving? Is the weights going up? Am I fast? Am I hitting what I'm supposed to be hitting? Is it progressing over the right time frame? And if it is, then you just go, okay, I don't need to worry about it right now, because we can't obviously do of all those things together.
Two things.
Yep.
On that variation from what you said. One is that complexes.
Yes.
Obviously, that's quite. The kind of thing I'm thinking, I was like, the two questions are, how specific can a variation be to a person? Like, can it be super weird and specific for a person, or is it like the path has been sown, there is these set ones that are really good for most people who should probably follow the path?
Yes.
Or is it that this person has this very specific part of their lift, and I could prescribe them this? Kind of following on from that.
In theory, I would never say never, but in reality, I would say...
It's like mostly that, yeah.
Yeah,
and
like...
then the complexes, it's like,
yeah.
When really should you use complexes?
So that comes down to their issue and your knowledge as a coach and what stage their training is in, or your knowledge as you as an athlete. So if, say we talk Camilo again, we're going to do a high pull plus full snatch complex, that's going to be great for him. But if he's really weak overhead, it's going to be pointless to do with him, So it's tailored to the lifter's need. But lads, I haven't seen a new problem in 5 years. I'd say 6 years in a weightlifter, after seeing more weightlifters than ever. Like, could probably close my eyes and guess at an issue, and I guarantee it would be a problem in one of your issues. So most of it's laid out, and that's a good thing, because you want to be the same as everyone else. You want to be on the beaten track. You don't want to be a squat jerker. You just want to be, this is the thing people have done before me. This is how they snatch 190. This is how I'm going to get there. That's what you want to be. You don't want to, and you should be forcing yourself to a certain extent into the round hole if you're a square peg, because you're much better off than trying to figure out really strange ways. And it sounds kind of crass in some ways, and it can be kind of almost like a tyrannical coach within reason, but I haven't seen anyone different yet. No one special. It's just harder for some people than it is others, but it's hard for everyone,
How big should a complex get to max?
So outside of a GPP phase, you're probably looking at a total of 3 reps. Sorry guys. A total of 3, so maybe we're doing snatch, high pull plus snatch, maybe even 4 reps. So we might do 2 plus 2 for a bit, and 2 plus 1 or 1 plus 2. But if we're getting into, more than 3 different variations, and
like 2 cleans, 2 front squats, jerk. That's too big.
No, that's okay. So if we're getting more than that, it makes sense in that scenario. But even then, how long are you going to do that for? That's really only for a week or two. So if we're at that 3 or less, I think is probably a good rule of thumb. Like if we're doing snatch, pull, hang snatch, overhead squat, snatch balance in an actual working set, so not like a warm up, but an actual working thing, you've gone too far. But if we're doing high pull, hang snatch, overhead squat, that's feasible for a period of time. If we're in a higher volume phase, if we're really far back here, then we can, I think, make use of that and not be a dick about it. But sometimes people just use complexes for everything. It can be useful in a class environment like that, for example, but most of the time your complexes should be, I think 3 or less is reasonable, like clean front squat jerk, clean hang, clean jerk. Like, 'cause you're not going to do clean hang, clean front squat jerk. And I know we've seen those kind of clock off complexes, but he was going uber heavy in those, and to a certain extent they were kind of nonsense, but he was able to go so heavy in them, and they have the time to train, so he has recoverability to train as well, so he can do those super heavy complexes and still do his clean and jerking, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Answer the question?
Yeah, great, amazing.
Perfect. Anything else on that, on variations? So variations are useful, but they are, and you should be just pretty rootless with, don't get attached to them. And if it's too late in a training block, so if we're on week 10 of 12 for a training block, don't add in hang snatches if you haven't been doing them. It's too late. You have to accept that you're okay, the issue is there, I'm going to try fix it with the snatch, clean, jerk, but just going to max out. Another thing on training, go for it, Benedict.
About variations.
Yes.
One more thing maybe, how much variation should we generally in relation to just doing the full lift?
Never more than 1-to-1 with your full lifts. So if you're doing, let's say 2 variations a week and 1 full lift, you kind of don't want to be like that for too long. You kind of want to keep it a 1-to-1, or preferably maybe a little bit more frequency, unless the issue is really bad. And then there's, of course, there's room for most things. I wouldn't, again, as I say never, but you don't want to be doing 3 hang snatches a week and only 1 snatch a week. You kind of want to be doing, you might have a complex with full snatches in, so I'd kind of consider that snatching, and then you might have the low hang snatches in and you're snatching from the floor, for example. So you don't want to ever be super outnumbered, but there is times where we might be 2-to-1, for example. Maybe we might be doing low blocks, hangs, and then fulls from the floor, but not very long. Go for it, Ken.
Yeah. Do you consider snatch balance a variation to snatch?
No, I would consider that a bit more as assistance work, and that's kind of as needed basis again,
And the variation time frame over a 6 week. I know you said you change it if you definitely need to, but
yes.
should you aim to have a 6-week progression or a 12-week progression of
Yeah.
those variations?
You're aiming for a reasonable time progression. Unless given reason to do otherwise, you'll keep progressing with those. You'll still try and get to a heavy hang snatch, maybe if it makes sense in your programming, or a heavy high pull and snatch in your programming. Unless you don't need it anymore, or if it's stopped working, or if it's having negative repercussions, then you go, okay, this isn't doing great, And yeah, if it's doing its job, then keep it in there. Yeah, and if it's not, don't waste your time with it. So strength training follows the same idea, but there is some nuances, because it always makes way for the heavy snatch and clean and jerk. You don't want to be going for your 10 RM when you're doing the same week as your max snatch. So sometimes there is a case for strength to take precedent, or take over compared to other kind of take over compared to your snatch or clean and jerk. But even then, it needs to be really justified. You need to be very, very weak, where you need to do something like you're clean and jerking 130 and you're front squatting 135 or something like that. And even in those cases, you don't really want that snatch clean and jerk to take a back seat. You want to be still trying to push both of them along, and you can very reliably push your strength, your clean and jerks, or your snatching together, your front squat and your back squat. You can push them most of the time. I think maybe 1 in 100 lifters are at a stage where you've been like, right, we really need to put the lifting on a back seat for a while because the squatting is so bad. So if you're supremely weak, you'll know it, but if you're not terribly weak and your strength is still progressing, then I would never really give it too much precedent. You can take a little bit of period of time where you might really want to bring up your back squat if it makes sense, and you're doing kind of a lot lighter lifts for a period of time. You might run the rotating your squat program, and you're doing some higher volume stuff for 8 weeks, and you're not going to be going super ham on it, or you do want to get a head start, and that's fine. But if it's in a training block where we're trying to push both, don't compromise your snatch clean and jerk by going ham on a 3 RM front squat when it's your heavy clean and jerk day in 2 days time or something like that. So just be sensible with the strength training, but it follows the same progression as that. Obviously, you're going to start with higher volume. You want those numbers to be going up. You want to be pressing your 1 RM number and your front squat and your back squat, and you're always operating in the view for future numbers. So let's say we like a rule of thumb of somewhere between 160 to 180 for your first 100 kilo snatch, maybe a little bit closer, preferably to that 180. But if you are going to snatch 100 kilos soon, you don't want to be kind of sitting on your laurels with the squatting and think, okay, I've enough for 180, because once you start training then for 110, you're going to be needing to push closer to that 200. So you always want to be operating with some leeway for yourself. Otherwise, you're going to make things very difficult. So if possible, try and have a head start and operate with the view that while I might have enough strength now, whatever that means to you, then I want to have enough for my future goals, assuming you want to keep progressing, which I think everyone would want to keep doing. So usually we do want our squats to be not at our strongest squats, but pretty strong around the time we're max your snatch, clean and jerk. So usually, for example, before competition, I like a heavy back squat about a week to 10 days before the competition. Hopefully it's a representation of your good squatting ability. Hopefully it's beyond 90% of your best back squat. But if for circumstances, injury, pain, training, something didn't allow for that, we still want it strong, as strong as we can make it. So you do want to be near your peak strength, but preferably it's not new realms. But again, it depends on the lifter. If you're supremely talented and you're on a roll, you know, you're a 20-year-old freak in nature and you're just hammering lifting, that'll go quite well. What's that? For some lifters that'll be easy, but for other people we have to be a bit more like, okay, I'm trying to clean and jerk 120 this competition. I know I need around 150, and you know you can hit that 150 again. In that 50 might be enough, but we do want to be thinking, okay, where does it need to be in the future? 50 is enough now, but I'm going to need 170, so I'm going to balance everything else and then hit that 160 or 170 front squat. They will follow pretty closely in tandem. Both of them will start higher volume. Most of the time in weightlifting, we don't go super high reps. We don't really go into those 10s. We'll maybe do some 8s for a while, but it'll be kind of 6s to 3s where we'll spend a lot of our time in weightlifting. So that should be pretty sufficient volume intensity to progress, but also not super murdering on our lifts from the floor for the snatch, clean and jerk.
Sorry.
Yeah. So if your best back squat's 200 kilos, you know, you don't need to worry about it for the moment. So you can definitely put that work in for the 100, and then take a look at and see, okay, what's the next kind of goal? Is it 110? Is it 115? Then you probably, I have had lifters do stuff like a 130 block snatch with a 200 kilo squat, but you don't want to be in that scenario, no. And I don't think, Joey, you would be, for example. So you kind of want to be, once you hit that 100 kilos or maybe a little bit more, do keep the train rolling. Yeah, do keep that train rolling. Don't rest on your laurels. Like, for example, Chris, you're saying you're a lot stronger with your lifts. Like, don't let that gap close too much. Keep your strength for sure. And if the stronger you are, the easier it is for you to stay strong. So I would recommend never letting that go to...
Oh yeah, I always want a bigger squat.
Yeah, for sure. If you're doing me, for example, like I wasn't going to be able to do a 300 kilo squat and snatch 170 at the same time, but for me it'd be do the strength stuff first and then maybe do something after with that, you know. So for most lifters in your scenarios, you can do both for sure. And like, to be honest, the only time I've really seen a run into issue is when people start kind of getting into something seems to kind of happen around the weights where you're getting close to 140, 180 in those lifts. That's when the squatting numbers are big enough where they start to impact. Like, absolute weight for everyone is an absolute weight. Like 240 is pretty heavy for everyone, you know. It's not heavy relative to Lash's max, for example, but at the end of the day, it is heavy enough, you know. It is heavy, even if it's the same percentage, 240 for a lifter compared to 140 for a lifter or whoever. That percentage, that absolute weight is just still a bit more fatiguing and it takes a little bit more thought. So I don't see it as much with lifters when you start getting into the late 130s and 170s, where we need to be a little bit smarter with our strength, a little bit more precise when we're doing it. But for everyone pulling back from that, you're concurrently pushing both of them is very feasible, and pushing and maintaining, and you don't really need to be in a point where you'll need to see them regress unless something happens injury wise. But for elsewhere, having both of those going up together is very feasible, very good idea, and not detrimental, because the frame doesn't change so drastically as those weights. Like, there's a linear increase in weights, but the in-body is, you know, it's going off on a curve. Like, we're seeing a pretty big change in muscle mass from a child to an adult male, but then an 80 kilo man, you know, isn't drastically different to a 100 kilo male in absolute weight terms, in terms of physics. So you will see that it takes a bit more time. You'll see you'll see technical ability is better with lighter weightlifters in general. Their technical proficiency is usually better. They're usually faster. They're usually lifting closer to their maxes in terms of their snatch and clean, or their snatch, clean, jerk to their back squat and front squat. So you'll see heavier lifts more frequently in those training blocks, but you'll probably see it with better technique. But you know, for example, for Lash, jerk isn't amazing. It's not bad, of course. He jerked 270. It's pretty good, but it's
pretty good.
But for Lash to make adjustments at his 80% is still much more fatiguing for someone who's clean jerking fucking even 200 kilos, which is a massive lift. It's still easier for that 200 kilo clean and jerker to make adjustments reliably at 180, 190, as opposed to Lash to try to make adjustments at 240. So if he's best 270, like, he can't really do a lot of technical work there because the weights are so hard psychologically and physiologically, you know. So, but again, if you ever get to that stage, You're doing great. So it's a good problem to have. Yeah, it's a good problem to have for sure. Mostly concurrent together. Mostly they should be pushing together because it is very feasible, and that's a better option because you don't have to get super intricate about what's lagging behind and when am I going to finish up my strength. And generally though, as a rule of thumb, try and have that strength peaking about a week or 2 weeks before you're going for those heavy singles. But it's not detrimental to go for that heavy single or heavy front squat or back squat the same week. But be smart, prioritize. Don't go for your heavy single and your back squat the day before you max your snatch, and don't max your clean and jerk before you max your snatch, that kind of thing. So just be reasonable, but we do try and keep them concurrent. Again, it's only when you're getting into those massive numbers where enough squat is enough. So, for example, Lash, again, is an extreme example, but we never see him squatting heavy because he's squatting enough to do his numbers. So he's not like, okay, I need to squat 400. He's like, no, I need to snatch 220, and doing 330 for a triple is more than enough for 300. Any questions? Yep.
For the 4 days a week, do you generally recommend like 2 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, 2 days off?
What the rule is, we usually say, is never more than 2 days in a row, really. Sometimes 3 days in a row is okay, but we don't want to be, jamming it all in there. There is plenty of days, but obviously sometimes life and work and stuff, it makes more sense to do than it is. You might have much better time recovering from training or be fresher for those sessions if you have to do 3 in a row. So you could do 3 on, 1 off, 1 on, then 2 off or something like that. But generally, it's nice to have 2 on, 1 off, 1 on, 1 off, 1 again, 1 on, 1 off. So it's, you don't want to be jamming it all in. But again, circumstances as non-professional athletes do have to allow for you just to be like, hey, this makes more sense for me now. Yep, go for it.
It'd be all right if let's say I can do 4 days without it being spread out
for kind of shift is what you're thinking.
Yeah,
So for shift it is a unique one, and I would nearly be on the side of when you're training shift, the nights probably not really training, getting one session in, definitely do your mobility or soft tissue work. But for shifts, most of the time you're better off just jamming it in, on that split shift, and then in your days, just trying to get the training done then.
So only try to go on days.
Yeah, it can be done, and I know you can do it, and if you have comp coming up or training blocks been going really well, but we have tried to, the real answer is try to get off shift and do a different job, if that's the goal. Shift is murder, just on real life and on training. But in regards to shift training, it is best to, it's not great obviously train 4 days in a row. Obviously, as you're aware now, you've done multiple sessions 4 days and you've been like, oh, it's pretty sore, we're doing a lot of soft tissue work. You see how much time we're spending on soft tissue work to try and keep this rolling. Similar idea with that. It's still better, I think, to 4 days on or something like that, or 4 days.
Yeah, 4 days on. I could just on days.
Yes.
Do 4 days in a row.
Do you have off days in between the night shift?
Yes, I do. So I can when I'm on nights, I have 4 days off as well.
Yes.
So the thing is the schedule, waking up and all that.
Yep.
I can train still.
Yes.
But it'd be I'd be awake.
Yes.
On my normal sleep.
Yes. Yeah. So ideally you'd train on your off days and your days, and then you said you have 1 week of nights per month, is it? Or
no,
one?
I have a full month.
Oh,
yeah.
It's brutal. So then you'll obviously have to train then.
Yeah.
Try and keep those months to the start of the block, if possible. Yeah. So try and think ahead, and am I back here with the lighter weights? Am I back at that 120, or maybe for you, let's say you're at that 85 or 90, kind of whatever you're in, and then try and aim for those new PBs when you're on that month of days. Or are you always on shift?
I think at the end of September I'll be off shift, so that'd be the perfect time to really,
yeah, it's best. Shifts is just murder for training. Caffeine is your best friend and stuff there, but
yeah.
Kyle, do you have a question?
Yeah, when you say training 4 days a week,
yes,
is that assistance and everything
Yep.
included? So 3 days you literally are not moving weight at all?
Yep, correct.
And then on those off days, you can still do soft tissue and whatever.
Yes, yeah, you can do a bit of cardio and stuff. So
if you can train more,
if you can,
if I can train more,
yeah,
I live in a gym.
Yes,
it's easy for me to train. I was training 6 days a week, which is what I do train.
Yeah.
If the recovery is good, is it better?
Yes.
If you're not going to weightlift
Yes.
6 times a week, probably.
Well, if you're not weightlifting, it might not be of use to you, know.
But as in, like, with accessories. So, like, if you could weightlift 6 times a week, that'd be.
Yeah, if you could. But if you can get progressive sessions in, you know, because if those weights are moving up in the right direction week to week, if they're just kiss me ass shit, like it's not, it's almost pointless, you know. It's probably negative for you, you know. Enough training is enough training. More training isn't better training.
Okay.
It doesn't make sense. So,
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
like, I haven't seen a lot of weightlifters train more than 5 times a week.
It's like.
In fact,
if I had an hour, let's say I had an hour session.
yeah.
And in that hour session, with pre-warm-up, if I want to get proper cool down, I have that dead hour. Just theoretically. I do my snatches, do my clean and jerks. At that point, I'm nearly an hour. I might squeeze in my squats at the end.
Yeah.
Let's say that's 3 of my days, front squats and 2 lots of squats.
Yeah.
When I look at all the other accessories I need to get in, is it not worth it having a day where you would get those extra accessories in rather than not have them at all?
I prefer days off or split.
Better to have the recovery.
Yeah, for sure. For your weightlifting.
You have those because you can't not squat, you can't
Yeah.
not snatch, you can't not clean jerk.
Yeah.
But let's say upper back work,
Yeah.
which is important for me.
Yeah.
I don't get that in. That's less important than actually just getting
It depends how much you're not getting it in. You know, if you're not getting it in all throughout the week, then you have to fit it in. But if you're getting half what you might get in, I would prefer that half, and then you get those days off.
And what about if we change that a little bit?
Yeah.
And I had the 2 to 3 days off,
Yes.
but I could double shift other days where I did like weightlifting squats, accessory sessions.
In the morning and evening kind of thing.
So if I had an extra 45 minutes and I could do an hour session here, a 45 minute session here,
Yeah.
and I have 2 to 3 full days off,
Yeah.
and I just really ram the training into those bits, would that be better?
Possibly. Yeah. Possibly. It depends. I would wonder why your assistance work is taking so long. Is the thing. Like, I'd like to see.
This is all fit,
Yeah.
theoretical, but like,
Yeah.
it's just interesting for.
Ideally, like those full days off are invaluable. Like sometimes you see, very frequently see lifters train less and they've gotten better. More question. Like, so when he was asking about Olivia Reeves, who said she's training 3 or 4 days a week. It's certainly possible, like that she is doing that. And I wouldn't, if she says it, I suppose I wouldn't doubt her. To, if she says she's training 3 or 4 days a week, then it's for sure. Like, I've never. Like she's just getting quality in. Like I know Clarence, outside of when he was Poland, when he did his biggest numbers, he was just training 5 times a week, once a day, sometimes 6 times a week. But those sessions are like 2 hours long. Like it's, to a certain extent, it's just quality then, you know. I know there's a magic to the quantity, but if you're not a professional athlete, there is no, the quality drops off for sure. Yep.
So, if your goal is not singularly focused on increasing your snatch and clean and jerk, but you have some physique goals on the
Yes.
side,
Yeah.
you just want to look more jacked,
Yes.
would you then, like, how would you work that in? How would you?
Then you'd have to take a bit away from your weightlifting, and depends like how much hypertrophy work you want to do, how much you want to improve your physique. You know, there's a lot of things there where you're like, okay, I'll have to do a little bit less weightlifting, because ultimately, like, you need to be. The big thing for weightlifters is, especially amateur weightlifters, you'll frequently see they're like, oh, that's easily new they kind of want to do, but they can't accept or can acknowledge that, oh, look, this probably isn't great for my weightlifting, you know. So anything outside of weightlifting is just not great for your weightlifting. I suppose is the best way to look at that, and assume, unless proven otherwise, that it's bad for your weightlifting. And if that's okay, that makes perfect sense. Like if you're just like, yeah, I'm perfectly fine with that, with a little bit less progress or a little bit longer time horizon for progress, then that is a-okay. But the biggest problem is when people are like, no, I can do loads of bodybuilding, or I can do jiu-jitsu and weightlifting, and, you know, when you can't, you know, it's not realistic. But that doesn't mean it's the wrong goal. It doesn't mean it's the wrong thing to do. If you're happy doing that, then that's, yeah, it's, you're there. You're not professional athletes and you're here to enjoy your training. So if less weightlifting progress, but multi-sport is your goal, then more power to you. But you do just have to accept, that's probably the hardest thing, is people to accept that, oh, this isn't good for my weight.
Last question.
Yep.
Really stalling here, but on your first, let's say your first stream, you get to 120 on your
Yes.
max.
Yep.
That's a programmed 120, or you're like open to the day at what you could get, and then same again on the last 12th week, or is it like, no, I really want to stop at this weight, whatever?
So the rule is you should really be conservative, like quality over quantity at that stage. So you're like, hey, let's say you do 117 on that day, and you're like, 117 was sweet as a nut, and you're like, I could do 120 today, but it wouldn't be great. Or in that case, then you'd be like, okay, I'll leave it for this week. I'm still halfway through the program. I want to be conservative. I know I'm going to get more chances. Or it was unbelievable, and you've never done 117 like that, then fucking go for it, you know. Like, if 117, you just did 117 that day, that was planned, but 120 was your max, and you were like, I could do 125 today, then, you know, make hay while the sun shines is the saying we have in Ireland, which means effectively if something's good's happening, but you do have to be reasonable, you know, and if you're doing that every training block, you're being a bit of a cunt about it, you know. Whereas if it's like been 3 blocks in a row and you haven't done it, and you're like, oh shit, today's on it, you know. Like if you're, maybe that 100 for you is there, you do kind of have to take it. Now it's a bit different if you're going for a competition, you might need to be a bit more conservative, but at the end of the day I would still take it, you know.
Yeah, because on the last Sika block I tried, you have like the week before the last week, you
Yes.
have like a work up to a maximum misses.
Yes.
For example.
Yeah.
And I did that.
Yeah.
To a new PB.
Nice.
No misses.
Yeah.
But then the week after,
Yeah.
I couldn't hit really above it, but that's fine.
Because you hit your PB, that's the whole point of weightlifting, programming as PBs. If you could do that every week, then that's fantastic, you know. But
Okay.
if that's not happening,
Okay, cool.
make sense? Any more questions?
Yeah, harkening back to weightlifting plus bodybuilding.
Yep.
And maybe we can work out some details on a one-to-one basis. But
Yeah.
I think like that's it. I think of course one will take away from the other,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like you could probably strike a balance where you get like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, put in a little bit of the effort and get most of the results.
It's-
Both of them.
It depends on how far you want to push it, you know. Like, is it a little bit extra muscle, then it's probably not going to impact your weightlifting at all or much. But if you're like, hey, I want to be 8% body fat and have as much lean tissue as I can manage, then, you know, it's how far do you want to push either one of those goals. It's like kind of a seesaw effect. If you want to do more bodybuilding, the weightlifting is going to go, and the other way around, you know. So there is a little bit of each you can do, and a little bit of the muscle mass will help weightlifting for sure, but it's how far do you want to push them is the thing, you know. So bodybuilding with weightlifting isn't a major one, but if it was like ultramarathon running with weightlifting, or 5-a-side football, or sevens rugby, you know, how intense is that, and how far away is that attribute or that sport you want to do from the sport of weightlifting. Weightlifting helps every other sport, but no sport helps weightlifting. Weightlifting makes you better at every other sport, but sports make you worse at weightlifting. Every other sport reliably will make you worse. Nothing that you can do outside of weightlifting will make you better at weightlifting. Just, yeah, like helps you everything else, but everything else will take away.
You might already get into this, but if a block is 12 weeks,
Yes.
are there like different phases to the 12 weeks?
No, as far as weightlifting for you guys is concerned, no. Once a year you should do kind of a GPP phase. You're doing a bit higher volume. You might try to build a bit of muscle mass. Maybe you want to go for a phase where you want to build some muscle or you want to lose some fat. That's generally about once a year. Very, very distinct phase, somewhere between 6 and 8 weeks, but most of the year should be this kind of just...
Kind of like high volume, low weight, working up to a max over 12 weeks.
Yep.
And then you just start it back over. High
Yep.
volume, low weight, but just slightly higher.
Yep. The problem is...
Kind of like,
yeah, real life gets in the way. It will happen sometimes, and that's when you have some great training blocks. And some years you'll have a year where it's on a roll. Another year, like there was one year, my best snatch was 115, and my best clean and jerk was 120. No, hang on. My best snatch was like 105. My best clean and jerk was 125. And then the year later, my best clean and jerk was 126. My best snatch was 115. And then I went from 115, 125 to 125 and 145 in 3 months. So you just have to keep going. Just don't lose the face. Keep it up. You know, that's weightlifting's hard. There was no other way to progress in weightlifting other than this.
Did you feel that moment coming
Yeah.
where you were like, I'm good at weightlifting, now
Yeah.
I'm great at weightlifting?
I basically changed closer to this. I learned more about weightlifting. I changed my coach at the time, and I just went even harder on this kind of training. Yep.
and how do you like assure that you're getting technical progression? Like, is your recommendation just everybody get a coach?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. 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 That's it. I have a coach, Anton's there, and I would argue I know as much as anyone on the planet about weightlifting technique, but it's just impossible to be objective, you know. It makes such a difference. It's so valuable. Like Anton doesn't do my programming, but I still technical feedback all the time.
And how do I know I have a good coach? Because like you guys have like basically every cue you've given me
Yeah.
is opposite from what I've been told.
Yeah. Kind of intuition, bullshit meter. Does your results improve? Have you been honest with what you're doing? Like, are you trying to follow that feedback? Are you following the program to the best of your ability? But is it still not working? Maybe it still might be you, but it's after a year. Have you got nowhere and has nothing improved? And is there no good reason for why it hasn't improved? Then you could be like, oh, this guy's, or woman or gal or whatever is shit, you know. But I would, like any profession, there's lots of bad coaches, mediocre coaches, and then there's some gems out there.
Yeah.
And it's just on you, unfortunately, in the current amateur free market kind of environment to find that person.
And do you think, sorry guys, this is my last one. Do you, like, be honest?
Yeah.
Do you think the once a week, like if I bought your app and I
Mm-hmm.
watched the video questions once a week and
Yeah.
whatever, like, do you think that's enough coaching?
Oh yeah, I've been focusing on my upper back for the last 4 months, you know.
Yeah.
The cues don't change that much. Things change, stay relatively similar. Things take a very long time to really adjust, you know. And like you've seen, we've been talking about the same cues for most of the week.
Yeah.
So basically the same things, like they take ages to ingrain, and then as the weights get heavier here, you have to reinforce them. Remember I was talking about my upper back there in the snatch, like I was doing it on the 120s and 110s and 130s, and then when I did 140, I went back, slightly back to an older habit, so it's like, oh, guess what I'm doing for the next training block?
Yeah.
More on my back, you know. So yeah, we see it reliably. Kendrick's been in the group for a long time. You take that feedback and you apply it to all those sessions, it does improve. Okay, we move on. So variation, yeah.
I think so my question is about tapering for a competition, and especially then the weeks that follow that taper.
Yes.
Because I've heard that athletes can get hurt a lot right after a competition if they go back to heavy training too quickly, for example.
Yes, yep, that's very
As
correct.
they're kind of detrained.
Yep.
So
you just,
maybe how would you do like an example taper?
Yeah.
How would you do like maybe the first 2 weeks after?
so taper is, this is the week before the competition, and then we do a competition week where we do very light sessions, and then we'll do one heavier session. So in the snatch, we'll normally do first attempt, and in the clean and jerk, we'll do last warm up. About 2 or 3 days beforehand, some slightly heavier front squats, and then you do the competition. Weightlifting is all about the training block beforehand. The taper won't save you. It can make it a little bit better, and you can definitely make your training a lot worse with a taper and weightlifting if you go too heavy. So we're just super conservative at weightlifting. You do the comp weeks after. Generally, at least a week away from the gym is great if it's been a big competition, and then you hit the ground running again, and you decide, do I need to do a bit more volume now? How do I feel? Am I very fatigued? Do I lower that max, or do I keep training? So that kind of comes in then, I suppose, the art of coaching as opposed to the science of coaching.
How often should you compete within one training block?
I like 4 times a year, 3 to 4 times a year for most lifters of kind of the situations you're in, for sure. And then obviously if you're trying to qualify for bigger things or international teams, it's a lot different. You have to go by what you need to do rather than what you would like to do. But 3 is a nice number, I think. And 4 can be done for sure very comfortably.
So basically one every training block.
Pretty much, yeah. If you like competing. But again, you don't have to, you know.